and I haven't told this story, I don't think ever, but my dad for my birthday took me to get my past lives read. And I remember this lady that he was dating at the time that was doing the reading. She was like terrified of me and during the reading. And I remember looking back at it now, there was a demonic manifestation happening with me in the room. And I just thought it was so cool. I knew what it was. But these things they taught. I was a lonely, broken kid, and I know now as a man, if God would have answered that prayer, it would have ruined me. As a father, he was betting on me. He's like, but I know who my son is. I know who my son is. I know I'm willing to bet that if I just protect him enough, he is going to walk this road. And when the time is right, he is going to listen and he is going to choose me and never turn back. He was willing to bet on me because he believed.
It gives me great pleasure knowing that you choose to listen to this episode on the John Gardina Classroom. My mission is to serve the Lord by creating content that will help you in your journey of life. If you want one-on-one coaching or would like to be part of my 40 Days of Deliverance program, please visit my website at johngardina.com. Also, if you would like to give a financial gift to help the show grow or provide the funds for the editing process and publishing of the show, it would truly be appreciated. Lastly, God has given me a vision to have a place in the woods with cabins to enjoy fellowship, healing, along with outdoor activities with others. If you have land and feel compelled by the Lord to donate some to make this vision a reality, please email me. I will have all the information available in the show notes. Thank you and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the John Gardina Classroom. I have a phenomenal guest today, hailing from Colorado, where he's got some snow. We got some snow in Cleveland, and his name is Greg Wanberg. Greg, I've been listening to his podcast. He's a man of faith. He's a family man. He sets the bar and the standard for everyone that he teaches as a coach. And he has gone through a true transformation from the beginning of his life until now. He has a podcast, From Ashes to Embers, that he's been doing for over a year now, November 6th. And he's really just killing it in what he's doing. And it's because of his experiences and the battles that he's faced. So, Greg, welcome to the John Gardina Classroom, man.
Hey, brother, I'm so excited. I'm a little Twitter pater right now, man. It's just so cool. Like what happened through listening to Andy Frisella, finding Chad, meeting people that Chad was connected to, listening to his podcast, connecting with those people. And like this whole thing is just so, it's so cool because, there are a lot of times as a Christian man that lives the way that I live, I feel lonely a lot, right? Because it is a lonely place. Like this is a lonely road. And, like Pilgrim's Progress, that story, he doesn't have people on his path with him. And it's not really supposed to be like that. But then when you find men who are strong and who aren't trying to like fake their way into strength by over spiritualizing it to justify their laziness, but they're like really strong and they have good hearts and they love the Lord, it's beautiful. So thank you. Amen. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy. The more we do this and you're trying to influence people in a positive way. And that's what we're both trying to do. And what people can have to truly understand is like that social media can be used for good. It can be used for really bad. And we are both using in a good way to connect, having strong relationships and making people better. And as both children of Christ, it's really our mission to bring people to the Lord and to make them, if they're a man, to make them the best man they can be. And if they're a woman, just to make them the best woman they can be for their family, for their community. So Greg and I are both on the same mission, and he really is. I can't say this enough, but Greg, you truly are setting a standard of excellence of how you model your behavior at home first, which I really want to get into, but also in the social airwaves as well. So let's start really where it began in your childhood and where you kind of flowed through there to become who you are today. So we'll kind of just go up like, what was life like for you growing up?
It hurt a lot. And, for anybody listening, I just, before I even get into this, because I care, I try to be careful how I talk about certain things that happened to me, because I want to honor my parents still. And because I really have forgiven them, like for everything that happened, like I love them. I want them to be blessed. My heart hurts for those things that happened, like me detached from the situation. I'm not a victim, right? And the Lord has healed me. But yeah, it was rough, man. Like, moments of being put in a room without food and no way out for long periods of time. Woke up with like almost being smothered in my sleep. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Honestly, the worst of it was just these things that were said and done to me where I believed that I was just completely worthless. It it wasn't like this like sense that like people have nowadays where like, oh, I feel worthless. It was like, no, that's my identity. And I saw the entire world as a child through this lens of being worthless, and not just worthless. Like there was so much that was put onto my shoulders and put on me as far as blame goes, that I believed as a kid, my worldview was that the world was worse off because I was here, that I was always going to screw it up, that I was always going to be causing pain, that everything, all the stress, the problems, they had somehow to do with me. Which is a trip, because as a kid, like I didn't want to be that, but it clouded everything. Like I remember there were times where I would see homeless people and my heart would be moved for compassion, and I would want to do something for them, and we would do something for them. And then immediately after, it was like, well, I'm a piece of crap anyway. Like thinking like this about myself as a child. Right. And like as a kid, you don't have words. We don't have the words that adults do. But it was these images and these feelings just deep down in the core of who I was. And when I was 7 years old, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's right. You led me right where I wanted to go. Like, so you were a child of 8, right? Is that correct? You had eight other or 7 other siblings, right?
Yeah. 8. Yeah. I had to count in my head. Yes. Yeah. 8. From my mother's first marriage, there were 5 boys. And then from her second marriage, there were 2 more boys and a girl. Yeah.
Okay. So then the families came together. And what age did you really start feeling that sense of loneliness and maybe fear, anxiety, and just worthlessness? What age did that start, Greg?
My first memory, as far back as I can remember, it was there always. Always. I was always just so terrified. Yeah. Like for real scared all the time.
And then you got in, and like you were saying, you were 7 years old, which then you're pretty aware of the situation, environment you're in. So go ahead and go off from there.
Yeah, well, like the thing with me is I do have a sense of justice, and what I have now and I've held on to for so long is I want to do the right thing. Period. Even as a kid, I had that. And so because I saw myself as a problem and I was still justice thinking, I realized one day that if I could remove myself from the situation, the problem would be fixed. And I was a monster too. Like I wasn't just like some good kid. Like I got angry from all this pain and all this stuff going on, and I was terrible. Like absolutely terrible as a child and as a young like preteen. It was horrible. But when I was 7, I realized if I could just die, this pain would stop. And I remember because I hurt my brother, we were playing Monopoly and they won the game. And I don't remember if I threw the board game or I hit him physically. It was just something. It was just some monstrous behavior. It was just this emotional outburst, just hurting people. But I didn't want to be like that. But I felt like I had to be like that because that's what was told to me. And I went in our bedroom and I remember crying. And the funny thing is, John, when I pray now, even now as I'm saying it, when I think of the Lord, I feel him. And I felt him then. I always knew who Jesus was. Even when I was a loser teenager getting high, people would be like, oh, I don't believe in God. And I'm like, that's stupid. Why don't you believe in God? I always knew who he was. And so I went in the bedroom when I was 7. And I realized if I could just die, that this would go away. So I said, all right, Lord, kill me. God, kill me. So I don't have to feel this anymore. And he didn't. So I'm like, okay, we'll take it away. And then he didn't. And so I cursed the Lord. I hate you. Screw you. Because I needed you. You're not even here for me now. Like as a child, I'm going through this whole process. And so that led to me actually opening up myself to the demonic big time. Like infatuation with death, infatuation with the macabre, infatuation with self-harm from like 7 years old. Yeah. It lasted for about 9 years. Yeah, it lasted for about 9 years. I would get books on black magic and horror movies and horrorcore rap like Insane Clown Posse. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but I believed what they were teaching. Yeah, man. I was religious about it though. I really believed what they were saying. And, got into Wicca and tarot cards and all sorts of stuff. And it was funny because there was one time, and I haven't told this story, I don't think ever, but my dad for my birthday took me to get my past lives read. And I remember this lady that he was dating at the time that was doing the reading. She was like terrified of me during the reading. And I remember looking back at it now, there was a demonic manifestation happening with me in the room. And I just thought it was so cool. I knew what it was. But these things, they talked back, right? They talked back. I was a lonely, broken kid. And I know now as a man, if God would have answered that prayer, it would have ruined me. As a father, he was betting on me. He's like, but I know who my son is. I know who my son is. I know I'm willing to bet that if I just protect him enough, he is going to walk this road. And when the time is right, he is going to listen and he is going to choose me and never turn back. He was willing to bet on me because he believed in me. I know that now. But back then it was just like, I needed help. You weren't there for me. I hate you. And so, yeah, so all through my teenage years, started getting high, like pretty young, maybe around 12 years old, started smoking pot, stealing it from family members, adult family members, and found kids at school to get high. And, there was a point in my life from, for about 4 or 5 years, I can remember being sober a few times. I was just like so high and just drinking, get in trouble with the cops all the time. If you're high, and I want to talk on this later because there's a very clear message in scripture about intoxication. And I think that Christians like to play with it because intoxication's easy. If I can get high, or if I can eat a certain food, or watch enough TV, or sleep in enough, or not push myself, there's this false dopamine, this false sense of accomplishment that comes, but it's just escape. It's just escape. And, that's all I was doing was I just didn't want to feel like me. And so I started getting high. And the more I was high, like I didn't like who I was at all, period. I just liked myself like a little bit. Well, I hated myself a little bit less when I was stoned. So I would just run to it. I would escape. Like there came a point, like before I was 16 sometime, I'm not really sure, where it just wasn't enough anymore. Because like even being high all the time, I still hated myself a little bit less. But my bones were like I was just so tired of everything I felt. Like the self-hatred, the self-loathing, like utter disgust. Like whatever emotion there would have to be to like smash a baby on a rock and not feel anything about it is how I felt toward myself, right? Like it was that level of animosity that I had toward me. But the weed and the alcohol and the stupid behaviors, they started to have less of an effect. And so one day we were hanging out, and one of my buddies, he's holding a Bic lighter upside down and getting it hot. And he's like, let's see who can burn themselves the worst. And I did it, and I still have the scars. And I remember, oh my gosh, like that like took everything away. Like that moment of intense searing pain was like, oh yes, okay. I didn't feel nothing. I just felt the pain. And so everybody was doing it because it was kind of cool. It's just a stupid teenager thing to do. I started doing it a lot because it helped me to feel better about myself, which was, of course, it's a lie. Like it's absolutely a lie. But it evolved. And then there was a night when I was 16 years old. And John, I'll tell you, for anybody who's listened to this, who understands like depression, how much your bones can ache. Like I remember even still, I can feel it. Like my nervous system hurt, which is crazy. Just from being so tired and hating myself so much. Like I was so scared of going from elementary school to middle school, and then from middle school to high school, and then what would come next. Because I knew I was worthless. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. I knew I was never going to be able to hold a job. I knew I was never going to be able to do anything different. I was always going to be doing dumb stuff and hating myself and hurting myself. And I was just so terrified, and I couldn't do enough to escape anymore. It wasn't enough. And when I was 16, it was late at night, like really late at night. And it was during the school week. And I was in my room and I was crying, and I was like, I'm just so tired. And I felt the same way that I did when I was 7 again. And I remembered, oh man, if I could just die, this will go away. And so I took a knife and I was about to cut my wrist, and I couldn't do it. And it was just like, what a freaking loser. You can't even kill yourself. Dude, you're totally worthless. You can't even do this. And I started to just carve my arm. And then I had an open vision. And instead of seeing the trash and the dirty clothes and my bed on the floor in my bedroom and the blood on my arm and the knife in my hand, instead of seeing what was in front of me, all of a sudden there was a face just on a Rolodex. And I appreciate that we're going to be talking to some like younger adults, maybe older adults, because they know what a Rolodex is. It was just a face on a Rolodex, and it flipped by, and it was a different face, and it flipped by in a different face, and it just kept going faster and faster and faster. And it was like hundreds, maybe thousands of faces. And I heard the audible voice of God, and he said, if you choose death, they will never know me. If you choose life, they're going to know me because of you. And I remember the vision ending, and I was just, yeah, but it doesn't seem worth it. It doesn't seem worth it to me. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to leave. I'm done. And I cried myself to sleep, and I woke up. The blood had dried on my arms. My tears had dried on my face, and my face was all like funky feeling. And then that happened 2 more nights in a row. So it was 3 nights in a row that this had happened, where God showed me different faces every night. And he told me the same thing. If you choose death, they will not know me. But if you choose life, they're going to know me because of you. And that 3rd night, I chose life. I remember just saying, okay, like if then I can find a way through this. And I have better language for it now. What had happened is I realized that there was somebody counting on me to hold on. Somebody out there was counting on me to not give up. Somebody was waiting for me to not quit. Right. And if I didn't quit, it was just this weird like understanding in myself that, okay, there's a way through this. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to show somebody else. And I remember the next day, it was just weird. I felt light, but I felt heavy at the same time in a really good way, like the conviction of the Lord, like mantle heavy. And I still I kept doing dumb stuff for like a year and a half or so. Yeah, I was still getting high, still terrified, still trying to escape, but my heart had been opened, and I let it happen. And no longer at the core of who I was I cursing God. Now, like, I understood something else. And I had started going to church at the time. This church my brothers took me to. I got kicked out of the house for stealing a joint from one of my parents. And so they took me to youth group. And then that's how I really got introduced to Jesus before this night when I tried to kill myself. But I had like committed my life to him. And the crazy thing looking back on it is, you know, he probably would have took me in his mercy, because I know God is merciful. I know he is. But he didn't create me to just go to heaven when I died. He created me to do something here. You know, and the thing for Christians is, like, when we die and go to heaven, we don't get to teach anymore. Not the way we can here. We won't get to help people anymore. Not the way that we can here, because everything will be sustained through him, you know? And so, yeah, so for about a year and a half, I was still kind of like, it was like one leg in, right? It was very, very mediocre. Very like, yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I want this, but I'm not willing to give up my friends. I'm not willing to give up all this stuff. Like, I'd hung out with the same group of people every single day for years. Like, this was my identity. And then one night I just felt like I'm lost and no, I'm not going anywhere, feeling sorry for myself. And my pastor, who was like a father to me, he told me, he's like, Greg, he laughed at me when I was feeling depressed, which is so funny. And he said, dude, you haven't even started yet. Like, how can God be done with you? And he said, Greg, I had a vision about you last night. You were driving a school bus full of people and you were hauling ass to hell. And he said, you're going to go to hell and you're going to take a lot of people with you unless you step up right now. And that was it. That was it. Like, from that day on, it was like 100%. Like, I left that night, went back to the same drug spot where we always hung out, didn't get high. People were making fun of me. I'm like, no, man, like, I'm really going to go for Jesus. I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. You said that before. And I had said it before. But then I left. When I left that night, I didn't look back and I stopped hanging out with them, totally disconnected. And now I was on the path. The crazy thing is like, I still had a lot to work on. I had so much healing to do. When I was walking with the Lord, my heart was not closed off to the demonic, because I opened that door on purpose by choice, right? So I still had the demonic stuff with me. In my head, the things that I had let into my heart, because you can let it inside of you. And I still had like clinical levels of depression that I was going to go through. I mean, it wasn't until I was 32 when it finally broke. I'm 36 now, when it finally broke. And we'll get to that here in a little bit, because there's a lot about how I lived that let it stay. But from the vision that my pastor had about me, and then the vision God gave me 3 nights in a row, and the words he told me, John, it was so deep inside of me. Like, when I was a kid, Terminator 2 is my all-time favorite movie. 100% all-time favorite movie. And I remember watching it being like, I feel like I'm John Connor, which is totally weird considering how I looked at my life. But I remember that was like almost like the one kind of like spark of truth. And I just was waiting for my Terminator. And I remember thinking this way as a kid. And now I found it. Right now it was time to step up. And from the vision that God gave me and the vision my pastor had, it was so deep inside me, John, that this is not about me. How I live my life is going to determine eternity for somebody else. Right. And that was so deep inside of me. And the change that happened with me is such a testament to the Lord. Like, it's so much glory to him, because it was almost instantaneous. Now, I still had a lot of learning to do. I still had a lot of things I needed to work out, a lot of ways I needed to grow up and change. But in my heart, something was different, and everybody saw it. Everybody saw it. It was like one day I was this kind of Greg, and the next day it was over. And there was some of that he let happen so quick, I know, because he had to get me home. He's like, come home. I'm going to love you. We're going to hang out for a little bit, and then I'm going to discipline you and make you into a man. But first, just come home and we'll hang out. And, it was almost immediately on this path, I started seeing people around me. And I knew I was inexperienced. I knew that I didn't know a lot about the Bible, but I saw the face of God. I heard the voice of the Lord. And I knew what I was saying was true. And so I started Bible studies at high school. It was me and like my little brothers and other dudes from our church. We were evangelizing all the time, like for years, years and years. At least once a week, we were downtown feeding and praying for the homeless as teenagers. Like this is what we were doing as teenagers. And it was always, if I don't do the right thing, somebody else could lose. And it was so deep inside of my head. And it was this kind of pressure. It was a really good pressure, like a good coach that's going to yell at you, that's not going to let you stay down, that's going to want you to go faster, even when you're hurting, even if you're crying, right? It was like this Holy Spirit was on me. And I could not get away from this awareness that my life would determine the outcome for somebody else's. And all I had to do, and I knew like out of the gate, John, it came down to character. I knew that it came down to character, right? What am I believing? What am I doing? Does my heart, my thought, my minds, my actions line up with what God says is right? Right about his design and right about his law? Because there's different kinds of right, but you know, it had to be all of it for me. You know, and so I was going through therapy, counseling, Christian counseling. I had demonic deliverances, several of them. And like crazy, crazy stuff, like stuff that they make movies out of, John. Like I've seen and talked to demons, even as a kid. I remember there was one time this lady was telling me, oh, you need to pray in tongues, because I went to a non-denominational church, charismatic. You need to pray in tongues. I'm like, do I? She's like, well, it's a proof of the Holy Spirit. And I knew that's not what the Bible said. I wasn't stupid. I know how to read the Bible. But I told her, like, I used to speak in tongues to demons, so I'm not too worried about it. Like, who cares? Whatever. Let's just like love the Lord. You know, and then I started to see how there were a lot of people, and it was very judgmental on my end, but it kind of saved my butt. I started to see how a lot of people said that they loved Jesus, said that they followed God, but their lives were miserable. They were out of shape, right? They were just like kind of like scummy looking, not necessarily scummy people, but just scummy, like charisma. And I knew, like, I don't want to be like that. But I was so insecure at the time. Ministry was everything for me. It is very important. And it was very important for me because, like I said, my change happened so fast that I ended up becoming that kind of Christian that you were just talking about. Right? Like after I don't know, like 5 years, 6 years on the path, walking with the Lord for real, then it really started to become about all of these ways where my character was flawed, all of these ways where I had to be disciplined, all these ways I needed to grow up. Like my work ethic was trash. My attitude was trash. I talked a big game, but I wasn't always where I was. And I do judge myself. I scrutinize myself pretty hard on this. Looking back, it wasn't as bad as I think it was in a lot of ways. But the truth is that I wasn't there. Like I wasn't where I thought I was. You know, so we got married, and ministry for me was, it edified me so much. It validated me so much that I couldn't even be at home alone with my wife because all this stuff from my past, and I didn't feel validated at home, because at home was where I was supposed to lead. That's where I'm giving what I have. And I was still so lost and hurting on the inside. I hated being home. So I was at the church all the time. And, you know, even after we had my daughter, our first kid, you know, it was still the same way. And so what had happened was, and this is where I base everything on: the right thoughts, the right actions, the right systems. Because I had the right thoughts. I believed all of the right things. You know, I was working on like speaking to myself certain ways, choosing to believe, even though I didn't feel it. Even though I didn't feel loved, do I choose to believe that I'm loved, right? Like I was working on all that. But then my actions in certain instances weren't right, like needing ministry, needing a position, not being present at home. My actions weren't right. And so then the Lord turned up the heat, man. I asked him, change me. I want to do this. I want to hold on to what you called me to be. I want to be that man. Roger that. Heat goes up. Now all this pain and everything, all these flaws are just completely in the open. They're in my face all the time. And then I started working on the right actions, like the right actions, the right actions, the right actions. And then, but I was still struggling, right? I was still like hurting so bad on the inside and letting in small ways, but significantly small ways. Like they were small, but they were significant. My feelings, like the thoughts that I was fighting, everything that the pain that I felt all the time, just dictate my behavior, dictate my attitude, dictate my openness to the Lord and what I was choosing to believe in the moment, that I couldn't do it for long periods of time. I didn't have fortitude. I didn't have good systems. And so I would think the right things, and then infrequently I would do the right things, but it wasn't a lifestyle. It wasn't this way over time. But I kept going. Like I kept going. I kept going. I kept, I held on to this truth. My pastor told me one time, he said, if you were more like Christ, you would not be bothered by this. And that floored me. But that was the standard. Just like Paul said, if a man wants to be a leader, which you shouldn't, he said, you shouldn't want this. If you do, this is the kind of man that you should be. If you guys are picking leaders, this is what they need to look like. It was all about character. It had nothing to do with spirituality. Well, not in the way that, you know what I mean? Not in the way that people like romanticize it. And so, yeah, it was this breaking process, the way that Paul had to make tents, where I was just in this pain for, gosh, man, like 12 years. A long time. Just clinical levels. Yeah, well, so there's a book by Charles Colson, How Now Should We Live? And he asks a question in the beginning of that book. And he said, what would life be like if we really believed what we say we believe? And I carried that. I read that book. I love that book. If anybody listening has not read How Now Shall We Live, it is so powerful. Read the book. But there was that question. And then there was all this stuff that I kept struggling with, right? And then like I ended up getting, because of my need for ministry, I started developing these very, very unhealthy attachments with the young adults and the youth that I was helping. And nothing weird happened, but it was so just like, it was a soul tie, right? I needed them. I had bound my soul to them, unhealthy. And so because of what I was going through and the pain that I was in and these like unhealthy attachments, like I stepped down from ministry. Like my pastor talked with me. He's like, dude, you got to step down. Like, okay. And then it was just me at home with my wife and my kids. And this was like 2015. And this, as far as depression and issues go, like everything had skyrocketed. This was like the worst it had ever been in my entire life. And I remember I couldn't be around the same people that I'd been around for help. And I'm sitting in a dark room in our basement. And I prayed, Lord, I need help. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. And Holy Spirit said, well, what kind of man could rescue you? He asked me that question. I'm like, that's a damn good question. So I started defining and describing and seeing who this man was, right? He's not afraid of what he feels. He doesn't take his emotions out on anybody else. He shows up with a heart of worship and faith, no matter what. That he knows what to say and when to say it. That he is strong. You can't tell what he's been through, but he has been through hell. And there was so many of these like very clear images that I got about this man. And then Holy Spirit, very rhetorical, asked me, why aren't you that man? And it was like my mind opened up like, holy crap. The whole point of this, right? Not only like what James talks about. I used to read James when I was super depressed. Like that's where my heart, because I really wanted it. I really did. And you have not suffered to the point of shedding blood on the cross like your Savior. Get your cross and get up the frickin' hill, right? That's the call. But there's a Bible verse, live a life worthy of the calling with which you've been called. And then the question, why aren't you that man? And then the other question, if you really believed what you said you believe, what would your life be like? And I realized I'm supposed to be the man that I needed for myself. I can't look for other people to do this. Not that I'm doing it on my own. Not that I don't need help. It's not any of this weird macho solo army BS. But I realized I am not working to be the man that I need, and I could define that man that I need, which is God opening my heart and my spirit up to show me who I'm really supposed to be, right? Like, so people I work with now, I'm like, who could save you? What kind of person do you need right now? I ask that question and have them describe that person. That's who you're called to be. And then we find the gaps, right? Like, okay, so I see the man who could save me is this certain person. So how am I not living like him today? What am I doing instead of the actions that that man would take? And then I started to fill these gaps. And that was part of the system that I was missing. I had the right thoughts. I had the right actions in most cases. But I didn't have the fortitude. And I was living and thinking in ways that that man wouldn't think. So that started to actively resist and push out and replace all of that stuff. And then it was the actions. And then it was, oh, hey, actually, when I work out, I feel way better. I don't get as depressed. The same stuff is going on, but it doesn't affect me the same way. And then there would be times where my wife would be like, hey, when's the last time you worked out? Which was a very passive aggressive, her telling me like, you're starting to feel sorry for yourself again. You should go do some freaking burpees. And, and so I started to do that. And then over around 32, it was like, okay, I can't be doing all this stuff that I regret all the time. I have to be acting like the man that I'm supposed to be. And it was like, I finally felt like I put my hands on it. And even financially, would the man who could save me be spending money like an idiot? Would he be racking up debt? Would he be buying all this crap he doesn't need? Or would he be taking care of his money for his family? Right? Would he be getting a better job to earn more money? Yeah, he freaking would. So that's what I did. And like that changed everything. Would this man tolerate unhealthy relationships? No, he would not. So we moved away from like pretty much everyone. We actually moved out of state. And it was through all of this, like I had the faith, I had the desire, I was willing and able. Well, I was willing. And then I was willing to be able. And so through physical conditioning, through programming my mind with truth, like recognizing that what am I thinking about? And I would challenge myself, does this line up with what I say I believe? No, then it doesn't matter how strongly I feel it. I'm not going to listen to it. And then this is what I'm going to believe anyway. Started doing that. Started getting better with our money. Started getting better with my time at home. And then even still today, it's just like shaving off these things that I regret. So I'm not carrying the guilt and the shame that come from that, so that I actually am living in peace. And that's really what broke it. When that question came to me, well, why aren't you that man? That's who you're supposed to be. You're not living the way you're supposed to live, which is why you feel the way that you feel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the whole time I was waiting for a miracle. I was waiting for some booming light. I was waiting for some like powerful prayer from somebody else. The entire time I was not living a life worthy of the calling. And you know, and there's this thing about the greatest commandment: love the Lord God with all your strength, your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, right? And we would talk about strength of like spiritual strength and mental strength, blah, 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 blah. And I just got tired of it. I'm like, what does strength mean? And I opened up a dictionary, physical power. Strength is physical power. And it was like, okay, if I'm not strong, if I'm not taking care of my body, then I am loving God at 75% at best. And if I'm not taking care of my body, I'm not taking care of my mind. I'm not taking care of my heart. I'm not taking care of my soul. So I'm not loving God the way I should be. So how could I ever step up the way I could for myself and for other people? I can't. Okay, then we got to do that. Cut that out. Start like getting the right actions in here. And, you know, like even like I ask Christian men now too, like, hey, do you really believe that you were made for glory? Do you really believe that? Then why are you out of shape? Why are you overweight? Why are you racking up debt? Why are you not holding a job? Right? I start having these conversations with men. Because for me, that was the conversation God had for me, and it changed everything. This is how a man is supposed to live. You're suffering because you're not living right. You don't need another miracle. You don't need another encounter. You don't need another experience of God. You need to start living how I called you to live. You know, and even for people who aren't Christians now, I tell them like the human body is designed to work a certain way. If you're lazy, and you're eating like crap, you are separating yourself from the truth. The closer you bring yourself to the truth physically, the closer you're going to be to the truth mentally, and the closer you're going to be to the truth of who you were made to be, which is true, no matter what. And I've seen it even in people who aren't Christians, like the power of like this thing. Now, of course, there is like the eternity part we got to worry about, but it all comes down to dissipation, which is why I've like really cut out alcohol. I've thought about this like ayahuasca stuff and like pot. Like I feel like it's wrong. I don't think that people should be intoxicated. It's hard to put a hand on it, but Ephesians 18 talks about this, and you guys can go look it up for yourselves, but it talks about dissipation. Dissipation is when you consume a substance that numbs your mind, right? Now, but it's the numbing of the mind that's a problem, because when you numb your mind, you're not present consciously to who you are and where you are and what's going on in the moment. When we do that, we're actually separating ourselves from ourselves. We're taking ourselves away from ourselves. And for me, like I didn't have a problem with intoxication because I'd been on the path for so long and I meant it. My dissipation came from all of these ways that I was not living the way that I should have, sleeping in, snoozing my alarm, making excuses to myself, not taking care of my body. And it was all these things where I just had dissipated myself. I had dissipated myself. And it's the pain and it's the struggle, like John, like you were saying, that we're supposed to go through it. But the reason why is because, listen, you guys, the same, Jesus had to suffer on the cross. Our salvation was in the pain. It wasn't the experience. It was in the pain of the retribution and the indignation of God against sin. And the physical expression of his wrath, which was the crucifixion, that Jesus had to go through, because it was in the pain where the keys were. It's in the pain where the treasure was. When we dissipate ourselves, when we scroll too much on our phone instead of getting busy, when we procrastinate, right? When we have too many screens, when we don't listen to Jiminy frickin' Cricket because he is talking to us, right? However you want to say it, I don't care. You know what I mean. You're dissipating yourself. You are taking the most precious thing that God ever created, which is you, away from him. And when you do that, you're taking the value that most precious thing could have for somebody else away from them. And you are taking away the greatest opportunity you have to live with purpose and glory in the moment, just in the moment, right now, just doing the right thing. And I know that there's a lot of pushback on this, right? It's funny because there's a lot of pushback from Christians about drinking too much. And there's also pushback from the church about physical conditioning, which is crazy. Now I want to say two things. One thing I just thought of from what you were talking, and the last thing is what the Lord has been really teaching me lately. Right? Jesus, you said obedience, and he went to the obedience on the cross. It was the obedience to endure physical suffering on purpose. He chose it. God didn't make him do it. He chose willingly to go. And if we look, and you guys, you don't need to be running 100 freaking miles, okay? You don't have to do Murph every single day. You can condition your body with 15 to 20 minutes of high intensity work and just go about your life. And you will still carry the benefits. And this is the second thing, and this is why I believe that. I believe that the foundation of every virtue, every character trait, every moral strength, I believe it's self-control. I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, and I'm like, Lord, what is it? Like, what is the base here? Because I work with people, so I'm constantly scrutinizing, do I understand this? How can I do this better? How am I communicating it? What is going on here? And I was like, well, maybe it's love. Like, no, because love's a choice. Okay, well, maybe it's righteousness. No, because doing the right thing's a choice. Well, what is a choice? A choice is self-control. When your self-control is lacking, your virtues are lacking because everything is built on choice, which is why I tell people all the time, you have the most powerful force inside of you on the planet because you can choose thoughts, you can choose action. No matter what is going on, no matter how you feel or how hard it's been or how tired you are, or how mean mommy and daddy were, it doesn't matter because you can choose to believe and you can choose to do in the face of all that crap and just rub it all up in the face of the enemy, right? Like you still can choose. But I believe it's self-control, and the easiest way to build self-control is a morning routine and physical conditioning. And especially for depression and anxiety. If you can say, okay, I'm going to do, listen, you guys, 5 minutes of burpees is a dang good workout. Just set a timer for 5 minutes, do as many burpees as you can, and then go about your life. You're going to feel powerful, and it's going to help you with your depression, anxiety, because what you're showing your feelings, what you're showing those thoughts and those sensations is, yeah, even though you're here, you don't control me. I control me, which helps you feel powerful. And I think that people should feel powerful, man. Like we were made for glory. Like Jesus is coming back soaked in the blood of his enemies, right? Even the mountains will bow. A freaking mountain is going to say, okay, yep, you are holy. How does that even work? That's such a crazy thing to even imagine. It's like a cartoon, but that's who he is. He is powerful. And whatever we can do to generate those sensations of power inside of ourselves and to display and embody self-control, we are on the right path. And of course, you got to be taking care of your mind too. I think it's funny how little we remember that we don't have to think what we're thinking, right? Like you don't have to. You control your mind. Everything starts in the mind. It's a choice. And then you do something with your body. And I'll tell you, man, it's been the craziest journey of life for me. It's just the craziest journey. One thing that has never changed, as much as I struggled, as hurt as I was, as stupid as I got, insecure and needy and like messy as I created life to be, one thing never changed about me. And it will never change. It was in me since the day I was born, and it came alive that night I chose Christ. And it's the reason why my wife married me. Like I was a ghetto street kid. She came from a good Christian home. She was a virgin when we got married. She'd only been drunk one time, and that was on accidents because she didn't know what alcohol did. So she just started drinking a bunch because it tasted good, and she got wasted. Like she didn't know. She's like goody, goody, goody two shoes, what we would have called it. She married me because she knew that no matter what, at the end of the day, I was a man after God's heart. And I was willing to do the right thing. At the end of the day, no matter what, I know what the right things are to do, and I'm going to do them. And that has been the game changer. That's why I'm able to speak the way I am. That's why I am able to live and come from the brokenness in my home. Like my kids have never known the kind of pain or anything like I went through. You know what I mean? And to be able to see what can happen on the other side of pain if you do what's right, because it's going to go away. Good times are going to go away. Pain's going to go away. The darkness is going to go away. It has to, because things change. The sun goes down and it comes back up. But it's what you do in the midst of those things, good and bad, that determine who you are on the other side. And we have to start caring more about who we are. And we measure who we are by how we live, how we think every single freaking day. And we got to care more about this, because I can go from everything that I went through, as hard as it was for me to just not eat a bullet as a young adult, day in and day out, bone aching depression for like more than a decade. As a Christian, this is what I struggled with as a Christian. And I just kept trying. I just kept trying. And now, John, to see the roots that went into the ground, and they bore fruit, man, because I did the right thing and I continued to try to do the right thing, really try. And now I'm able to give that fruit away. And it was worth all of it. I don't feel better about myself. The truth is, I still struggle with a lot of that stuff. Even today, I still struggle with it. I'm just better at it now. I know it doesn't have to affect me. I know who I am. I know when it flares up, this is what I got to do. I know that when I'm feeling this way, this is what I got to do. I know that when I want this thing, this is what I got to do. So I'm way better at it now because I found my strength in the pain because I didn't run from the pain anymore. So for me, like, I don't feel a lot of peace. I think the way that normal people feel peace. But when I look at my family, and even if I'm struggling at my work desk and I look over and my wife is like holding my son, that's my wife, my son. This is my family. This is my world. And that is what happens here. Easy. It was an easy freaking decision. But I had no idea, man. I had no idea how those small choices would have played out now. I just knew it was the right thing to do. And so I did it. So you guys stop romanticizing the outcome. Stop romanticizing the outcome. Just do the right freaking thing. Stop wanting so much. You want so much of the outcome or so much less bad feelings or so much less or so much more good feelings. Nah, stop it. It's not worth it. What you got to do is be the kind of person who can live that way today. That's it. Yeah. Well, John, thank you. Yeah. So it's at Greg _Wanberg. That's WAN as in November, B as in Bravo, ERG on Instagram, TikTok too. I don't know. Like, it was actually Justin Sheely was like, you got to get on TikTok, man. Start like expanding that reach. I'm like, fine. But so TikTok, the podcast is From Ashes to Embers on Spotify and Apple. Website is ashesToEmbers.com. Yeah. And I'll tell you guys, like, in danger but safe. In danger but safe is pretty much how I try to live my entire life. I love people so much. I love people, but I'll say hard things. I'll say something to people that like nobody else is willing to say to them. I'm the same way with my kids. Like, my daughter did 75 hard this summer. She was 10 years old. It's her first rite of passage event. Yeah. I had the kids out in the cold doing burpees and push-ups and flutter kicks yesterday. And, it's good. Like, I believe, man, I believe people were made for glory. That's the truth. But the reality of most people's lives is that they have been worse to themselves than anybody else. And I just believe that I can fix that. I believe that I can show people the way.